Please stand as you are able for the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice. "This is my Son, the Beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, he ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead could mean. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. When my son Henry was a little boy, whenever we'd watch a movie with him and the story came to a moment of tension, he would always ask, "What's going to happen?" And I'd say, "I don't know. We're going to have to watch and find out." But that uncertainty, the unknown, made him uncomfortable, nervous. When he got older and was about to enter middle school, he was a bit nervous about the unknowns of going to a new school. Fortunately, I was able to take him to an open house the week before school began, and we walked the hallways and found his locker, visited his classrooms, met his teachers. Then he was fine. But it's a common feeling for many people, that nervousness, anytime you have to cross a threshold from the familiar to the unfamiliar, when you're entering a different world, so to speak, where there's different rules and customs. Maybe you felt this if you ever started a new job, or you moved to a new neighborhood or a different part of the country, or been in any situation where you just felt like a fish out of water. As humans, we like to settle into routines and form habits. It's easier to do this when things are familiar. And it simplifies life when you know what to expect. If you're entering a different world, this means at some level you don't know what to do. And depending on the situation, this can be exciting or nerve-wracking. Well, we see this going on in today's gospel with St. Peter. Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, and mountains in themselves are different worlds. You climb them, you find different terrain, different plants and animals, different weather, a different view of the beauty of God's creation. Well, on that particular day, as recounted in Mark's gospel, the mountain became an entirely different world as God took the normal unknowns of being in a new place and kicked them up a notch. As the disciples stood there on top of the mountain, Jesus was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white. And then, just to make no mistake that God was doing something special, the great biblical prophets, Moses and Elijah, appeared, and they were talking with Jesus. Peter, James, and John had entered a completely different world on that mountain. They were getting a glimpse into the fullness of God's glory. The disciples had entered Jesus' world. They had gotten this glimpse ahead of time of the new reality he would create after he rose from the dead. On the mountaintop, entering a place where the rules were different, the disciples had a profound spiritual experience, and they didn't really know how to act. And they were nervous. In fact, they were terrified. Even Peter, who always had something to say, did not know what to say. So being Peter, he just said the first thing that popped into his mind. Rabbi, it's good for us to be here. Let's make 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. This was Peter's way of asking, what's going to happen? He was trying to make himself feel more comfortable when faced with the unknown. But just when Peter tries to make sense of something so completely mysterious, it's at that point when a cloud overshadows them, preserving the mystery, making it more mysterious. It's like God is saying, I'll let you know a little bit, but you're not allowed to know too much. I think that's often the way for us. If you've ever had a profound spiritual experience, there's a mystery to it that you can't quite explain. Even if you try to explain it, you can never quite capture what it was really like. There's this strange mixture of knowing and unknowing, brightness and cloud, comfort and discomfort, mystery and knowledge, the spiritual and the earthly. At unexpected times, God gives us these tiny glimpses into God's glory and then overshadows us with cloud so that we have to learn to walk by faith, not by sight. From the cloud, God speaks to Peter and the disciples, saying about Jesus, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Walking by faith and not sight means listening more closely to Jesus and then following him back down the mountain. As much as Peter wanted to hang on to this spiritual experience and make it continue, Jesus doesn't let him stay there for very long. They have to go back down, back into regular, normal, boring, everyday life. And as they are on their way back down, Jesus orders the disciples to tell no one about what they had seen until after Jesus had risen from the dead. Seems like a strange command. You think if they told people, more people would come to believe. But Jesus knows they need time to reflect on it. This experience didn't happen to make them holier than others, which if they started talking about it right away, maybe they would give that impression. The mountaintop experience happened so it would shape them and form them, so that when they did speak of it, it wouldn't be in a way that just called attention to themselves, but instead pointed to the good news of God in a way that made sense for the people they were talking to. And maybe that's another reason Jesus instructed them to tell no one just yet. Because as they followed Jesus back down the mountain to normal life, they would not only need to listen to him, but also to the people they would meet there. If you think back to last week's gospel in Mark chapter 1, Jesus says, "Let us go to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also." Following Jesus into the neighboring towns meant the disciples would have to enter the different worlds of their neighbors. And until they got there, the disciples would not yet know how to speak the good news of God in a way that made sense to the people they were meeting until they first got to understand those different worlds. I know I've officially finished my sermon series last week, but I'm going to quote the book one more time, Evangelism Without Additives. Jim Henderson writes that when Jesus entered people's worlds, just being with them was a sermon. So for us, following Jesus on his mission means we go to other people. We follow them into their world. We spend time in their cultural context, just as we ask them to spend some of their time in a new cultural context, which we call the church. And as we go, we don't need to spell out every detail of the plan of salvation, because Jesus expresses himself through Christians just being themselves. Here at House of Prayer, I think we've started following Jesus into some of these other worlds. And your world may overlap with some of them, probably not all of them, though. We've taken neighborhood walks. We've looked for God's presence while snow tubing at the Rock. We had Sunday school at Kayla's playground, enjoyed breakfast at Benny's Cafe. We've cooked and served meals for hungry and homeless people in Racine, and built handicap ramps through Revitalize Milwaukee, and sent our youth to help widows with their yard work, and on mission trips to serve people in Kentucky and Kansas City. Each time we enter another world, we can be looking for the presence of the risen Jesus there. And we can also listen for what is meaningful to the people in those other worlds. By listening to them and listening to Jesus, we can reflect on how to speak the good news of God in a way that makes sense, in a way that holds in a healthy tension the brightness and the cloud, the mystery and the knowledge, the spiritual and the earthly. I know we don't always know what to say or how to say it when it comes to our own spiritual experiences, but those experiences God gives you so that he can keep shaping you and forming you, so that if you do speak of it, you'll be able to point people to the good news of God, not just to yourself. And in the meantime, remember this. Research shows that not that many non-church-going people are waiting for Christians to become more articulate about their faith, but lots of people are looking for evidence of a faith that is grounded in Christ-like humility, kindness, love, and service.